Okay, this video is a book review. The name of the book is called Quo Vadis, and I did do a movie review about this before. What had happened was in my car, I was listening to the audio CD, and my CD player broke. Then I watched the movie, did a review on that, fixed my CD car player, and now here's the whole book review. And the book is better than the movie. The movie's really good, but this is Vinicius. He's the Roman general, one of the heroes of Rome. Okay, he's going to be the sort of leading man, but there's a more interesting character. The most interesting character in the whole book is this guy, Petronius. Petronius is a brilliant man. He's actually seated right here next to Nero, the Caesar, emperor of Rome at this time. And that is Poppaea, that's his girlfriend right there. She secretly kind of likes Vinicius, and that ends up being a little bit of a problem. But his analysis and the inner dialogue is fantastic. And that's a sign of a good book when there's interesting characters that have a fascinating inner dialogue. He falls in love with Lygia. She's a barbarian princess who's held hostage by the Romans to keep peace with her barbarian tribe, and she becomes a Christian. And so here is Vinicius, smooching with Lygia, and part of it. Later on, some of the things that are going to happen is Nero is crazy. He thinks he's a musician and an actor and a poet, and he really wishes he was Greek, and he's just crazy. He wants to have a dramatic event in Rome like the burning of Troy, and he sets Rome on fire and burns down about 2/3 of Rome. And he also is jealous of Vinicius because Vinicius is a real hero to the people, and he wonders if Poppaea secretly likes Vinicius. Okay, so that comes into play where he dramatically stages a big event at the end of the movie. I'll explain to you, though, why is this considered one of the greatest books of all time. And it really is one of the greatest books of all time. I would place it about fourth or so. I think the greatest book of all time is Charles Dickens' Christmas Carol. When I say greatest books, I mean the greatest novels of all time. Charles Dickens' Christmas Carol, I think, is the best ever. It's a real fast book. You can read it in a weekend. Number 2, Les Miserables by Victor Hugo. Number 3, Brothers Karamazov by Fyodor Dostoevsky. You can't beat the chapter, The Grand Inquisitor. And I like the example that Alyosha sets. Okay. And then, of course, for Les Miserables, Victor Hugo, Jean Valjean is just awesome. And I love the musical, the 1985 musical. It's fantastic. But every version of Les Mis is fantastic. It's one of the greatest, just an amazing book. Okay, so anyways, why is this book so great? Well, first of all, the love story is nice. The best part about the love story, I think, is the psychology of Vinicius. He really speaks his heart out, and you hear all his thoughts. And it's fascinating. And I can tell you, I went through, this phase of being young and in love, and the way every moment seems like the end of the world and stuff. That's how a young guy thinks. I was just like that. I feel like I'm listening to myself. In some ways, it's kind of embarrassing and pathetic, because if you're too in love with a girl, then she gets disgust for you. But anyways, it's good. It really is how a young man thinks. The author who wrote this book, Henryk Sienkewicz, he really captures how people think. And that interiority of all the thinking is actually quite fascinating. Here's a quote by Arthur Schopenhauer. Hardly anything happens in a great book. For example, in Tristram Shandy, almost nothing happens. What really interests us is the interiority, the thoughts of the characters. Arthur Schopenhauer, the great German genius. All right, so anyways, that's what this book's all about. It's fantastic psychology. And Petronius is the brilliant advisor to Nero, the most sophisticated person in Rome, and Nero likes talking to him to get perspective on art, poetry, literature, theater, music, etc. He's also the uncle of Vinicius, and he helps to protect Vinicius from all the dangers. Okay, it's about 17 audio CDs, and some of the things that were great about this book, it really shows the contrast between the Roman pagans and the early Christians. And basically, Nero was this fickle, crazy person, kind of like what Stalin was to Russia, kind of like the devil. I mean, he would just get in a bad mood and kill people. If he thought a young girl was pretty, he would go on what's called a pearl hunt and just kill her family and take the young girl for himself. He was just sick in the head. And like I said, he later burned Rome, and then he didn't want to take the blame himself, so he just blamed it on the Christians. But eventually that backfired on him. One good insight in the book was this line. The Romans did not have a God they could love, and thus they could not love each other. It's just so different, the contrast between how the Romans behave. I mean, who would want to sit there in a Colosseum amphitheater and just, celebrate all the brutal, evil things that were happening in that amphitheater? Feeding people to the lions and, crucifying people and all this sick stuff. And it takes a sick population and a sick leader to want that sort of thing. Versus the Christians, Christians are the best in the world by far for art, for literature, for theater, and for drama, and it kind of shows the way they behaved to each other. It's been said they were the first ones to bring forgiveness into the world on a big scale, on a society-wide scale. So you just see that difference, and it's so obvious. And it's kind of like when you read Brothers Karamazov, the striking difference between the approach to life of the brothers. Alyosha is the best. He's kind of easygoing, kind of laid back, kind of nice, initially wanted to be a monk. And you just like him, and everybody likes him, and everywhere he goes, things get better. And Ivan was brilliant, but Ivan was too narrow in his thinking, and that messed him up, okay? And then the other brother, Demetrius, was a hothead, and that messed him up. And Shmirikov was sort of so resentful, jealous, that it messed up his life too. So there's a very useful perspective. You look at them all and go, gee, I should be like Alyosha in Brothers Karamazov. Okay, what else keeps the reader reading? Well, to keep a reader reading, usually you have to like the protagonist. And Vinicius was good, but Petronius is much more interesting. Vinicius is in love with Lygia, and he is after her in every way he possibly can be. And at first she avoids him because she thinks he's a pagan scumbag, but later on they come to love each other, okay? The protagonist must want something that holds the reader's interest, and there must be obstacles to prevent the protagonist from getting the thing they want. So Lygia is always being pulled away for whatever the reason. Initially she's imprisoned, but later she's imprisoned by Nero and all this other stuff. So that creates a lot of suspense. But like I said, the most fascinating thing was all the insights of Petronius and the contrast between the pagans and the early Christians. And St. Peter is in the book, and so is St. Paul. The Roman legion was about 1,200 men. Nero commanded 32 of those. Nero is stupid, unreasonable, fickle, impulsive. And Peter Ustinov in the movie did a good job of playing him. Let's see, Petronius, even though he's a pagan, he's the good pagan. He's the best of the pagans. Kind of like a Seneca, kind of like a Marcus Aurelius, kind of like an Epictetus, Stoics and whatnot. I'll get to the key scene, why it's called Quo Vadis, in a moment. Nero fiddled while Rome burned. Yeah, it was unbelievable. And that's sort of a recent similar thing has happened in several countries, including Hawaii. Okay, Nero said that he needed more space in Rome for building, so he did that to create space. He wanted to call his newly built city Neropolis. Here's some of the other great books here if you're interested in some of the top novels. Okay. Now here's just some paintings of like how crazy Nero was. He would want to act out scenes from Greek mythology, Greek plays. One of them was the story of Dirce where they tied a woman to a bull. So he tied a woman to a bull. The poor lady, dies from that. And Nero would just do all kinds of things like that on a whim. The life of the citizens meant nothing to him. Nero even bumped off his mother. His mother, Agrippina, he had her go out because he felt like she was being too bossy. He had her in a boat that was designed to collapse. And when she swam away and escaped, he then, had his men follow her and finish the job. So, what kind of a sick man was Nero? He not only bumped off his mother, he bumped off his wife, he bumped off one of his brothers. Nero was sick in the head, okay? But he was the ruler of Rome. And everybody had to put up with that. So here's just a painting, The Remorse of Nero After Killing His Mother Agrippina by Waterhouse, okay? Here's the early Christians with St. Peter preaching in the catacombs. So Christianity initially was simply the religion of the poor persons, and that's what it still is today. I mean, it promotes the little guy. It says you're all equal in the eyes of God, including the king, all right? And it says that each one of you has a meaningful life and can try to serve the Lord and be on the side of goodness in the world and the struggles between good and evil. That's nice. It's the friend of the little guy. I think it's the only thing that wide varieties of people, basically Christian values, not necessarily being a member of the Christian religion, but Christian values, it's the only thing that could unify people. You got countries like Japan where people do reasonably well, but it's a monoculture, so they can do well with Shinto, okay? You've got, I know some really nice people from India, really nice families, Hindus and all that, and they're wonderful families and people, but what I'm trying to say is, if you're going to have a diverse population with people from all over the world, I think Christian values, not necessarily being Christians, but just the idea of man is created in the image of God, therefore the individual is special, part divine, love thy neighbor, be nice to each other, give each other the benefit of the doubt, treat each other as you'd like to be treated, follow the 10 Commandments. All that stuff gets a society to be nice, and people have to be nice and get along with each other, otherwise things get imposed on them externally, and everybody ends up being worse off, and freedom is severely limited. Okay, so here's the painting of the fire in Rome, Nero's Fire in Rome by Hubert Robert. And it was awful. It burned down 2/3 of the city, and Nero did like nothing. Nero started the fire. He wanted it to happen. It was sick. Okay, here's a picture of Nero fiddled while Rome burned, and he was. He's playing instruments, talking about his poetry. It's insane. Okay, and it reminded me of France a couple months ago. All right. Here then Nero blamed it on the Christians, and this is his leader of the Praetorians was Tigellinus, and Tigellinus helped start the fire, and Tigellinus helped set up these spectacles. So Nero figured that this would entertain the crowd while they were getting over, being homeless because their houses had burned down, and they crucified Christians in the amphitheater, in the Colosseum. They set them on fire. They fed them to the lions and other wild beasts. It was just sick in the head. And people actually, put up with this. That's how sick the whole Roman society was. But it also began to wear thin as Nero pushed this day after day. The people realized, how did a bunch of, women and children start a fire in Rome? BS. Nero did it. And that became pretty obvious. And basically, they say the blood of the martyrs is the seed of the church. It led more and more people to wanting to become Christians. Okay, and then Nero was soon overthrown after all of this. So during these events, you can see Nero up here, he had the Christians used as torches. They put them on top of poles, and they would just light them on fire at night to provide light. Okay, that's how it was. And what I'm trying to say is paganism ain't that different from, commie you-know-what-ism, okay? It's not. And if you don't understand that, you haven't studied history, okay? So here is Vinicius and Lygia, the barbarian princess. And Lygia was good, but she doesn't talk that much, okay? But she was good. She insisted Vinicius be a Christian, or she wouldn't want nothing to do with him, despite the fact that he was a super famous general in Rome. This is St. Peter's blessing them as they get married. Lygia was in prison, and they all thought she was going to be killed. Vinicius actually snuck into prison, actually in disguise. This is just a movie advertisement, but trust me, it's a fantastic book, and the movie is really good, but the book's better. The book is psychological, magnificent drama and story. Some of the events, too, is then Ursus was the big bodyguard, barbarian warrior who protected Lygia, okay? And there's a long story about how he had to fight a little bit against a bull in the amphitheater, and everyone thought Lygia was going to be killed. I'm being a little bit of a spoiler here, so I'm not going to tell you any more than that, but like I said, it's great, and I usually don't like too many books or movies. I'm actually pretty fussy. Okay, and then where does it get the title from? The title comes from Quo Vadis Domine. So after all these Christians had died, St. Peter had spectacularly survived, surprisingly, and he decided that he was going to leave Rome, okay, and go preach in other areas. And while he was leaving Rome, this is after most of the stuff in the Colosseums had died down. While he was leaving Rome, he saw Christ in a vision, and he said, Quo Vadis Domine? He said, where are you going, Lord? And the Lord said, because you have abandoned my people, I am going back to Rome so I can be crucified again. And Peter said, oh, sorry, Lord, I screwed up. And he turned around and went back to Rome. Okay, and here's just another painting of this one by Annibale Carracci, this one by Giovanni Adazzi. Okay, the Italians are just great painters, man. It's beautiful. Okay, and then here's another Italian. Caravaggio painted St. Peter being crucified upside down. He said, I'm not worthy to be crucified the same way the Lord was. All right, and he really did everything you could ask a guy to do, St. Peter, for being the first pope of Rome. He deserves to be the first pope, okay? He was in there, in the prisons, blessing all the Christians, trying to drum up moral support. They sang when they were brought into the Colosseum to be slaughtered by the lions, and that's one of the things that impressed all the Roman spectators, that what kind of people are this that go to death so gracefully? And they were so good and so nice, and the more people are around them, the more they want to be like them. They want to see their happiness, their peace, their kindness and behavior. It's a great thing. Okay, so here's a famous preacher, Fulton Sheen, and he also asked the question, Quo Vadis, America, where are you going? Where are you headed? Are you sure this is where you want to go? So anyways, it's a great book. It's a great movie, and hope you enjoy it.